Hello and welcome. Good evening. You are watching the Daily News Simplified. I'm Ankit. Now, as you can see from this slide, today is 12th of September, and we are going to discuss five important articles, in which three articles are from mains related discussion, whereas the rest two articles are from the perspective of prelims. Now, for those who you missed, please make sure to hit the like button and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Ankit, and this is today's Daily News Simplified. Now, let us start with the first article of the day. You can see this appeared in the Indian Express newspaper, and the news article highlights the importance of Public Accounts Committee. Now, you understand the primary responsibility of any legislature is to ensure the accountability of executive. Now, the executive, that is the government of the day, to spend any money from the consolidated fund of India, it requires the permission of legislature or parliament. Now, the Constitution of India, it mandates that the annual financial statement, which you otherwise know as the budget, it needs to be passed by the parliament every year. And this annual financial statement or budget, it accounts for various spending which is made by the government from Consolidated Fund of India, and it is known as appropriation counts. Whereas the money which is incurred by the government as a source of both revenue from non-tax as well as tax related sources, these money are utilized to finance the spending by the government, and these are categorized under the finance account. Now, the audit of both these two accounts are made by a constitutional functionary called the Comptroller and Auditor General. And based on the audits which is done by the CAG, this CAG prepare reports on spendings made from both appropriation account and the spendings which are added to the finance account. Now, the reports which are prepared by the CAG, it is analyzed by the Public Accounts Committee of the Parliament. So, indirectly, you can understand that this Parliamentary Accounts Committee, it plays a key role in ensuring the financial accountability of the executive, because this Parliamentary Accounts Committee is a subcommittee or a financial committee of the Parliament of India. So this is the primary responsibility of Public Accounts Committee. Now, in terms of the given responsibility, the Public Accounts Committee also can undertake suo motu cognizance of various subjects, for which it analyzes the decision and various day-to-day functioning of the government. So, in today's article highlights that this year the Public Accounts Committee has highlighted or picked up five different suo motu subjects, that is reforms in the banking and insurance sector, review of implementation of centrally sponsored scheme, policy measures which are undertaken for transition in the energy sector, as well as the performance review of regulatory bodies. Now, this has become a very subject of media attention, because under this performance review, it will also undertake review of a statutory body called SEBI. Also, this body will also undertake levy and regulation of fees and tariffs and user charges, which is made on public infrastructure by the government. So you can understand the responsibility of Public Accounts Committee is quite huge. That not just it formally and legally analyzes the capacity and ability of the government, is whether it is spending the money, the responsibility given to the government properly or not, but it also undertakes the proprietary and other economy related issues with the spendings made by the government, that whether the government is undertaking any irrational spending or not. So the responsibility of Public Accounts Committee is quite huge. So, in terms of this responsibility, this news article becomes important from GS paper 2 perspective, because the syllabus highlights parliament and state legislature, its functioning as well as power and privileges. And also, questions have appeared on this very topic in the mains of the year 2070. So in this regard, let us discuss what are the issues which are faced by the Public Accounts Committee in its day-to-day responsibility. Now, the first challenge is that the committee has a limited amount of time and resources at its disposal to undertake such a huge responsibility, because first of all, you understand the members. Now the composition of this body, it includes 22 members, 15 of which are elected from Lok Sabha, and 7 of them are elected from Rajya Sabha. Now they are elected from among the MPs of the House based on proportional representation through a process called single transferable vote. Now the chairperson of this committee, by convention, the chairperson belongs to the party of opposition, and the current chairperson become is a member of Congress party, which is the largest opposition party in India. Now, coming back to the issues faced by this committee, is that it has limited time and resources at its disposal. Now, the 22 members which are being elected to this committee, they are elected for a period of 1 year. So, understand, 1 year is not a sufficient time for members to develop expertise and give or discharge their responsibilities. Further, these members, they are laymen, that they are elected by the people, so they are not experts in the area of public finance. So, because of this crunch of time and resources, the committee is not able to discharge its responsibility efficiently and perfectly. Now, second challenge is the limited scope of examination. Now, the scope of the examination of this committee is that it checks whether the accounts or the expenditures made by the government is proper or not. However, this committee cannot comment on the policy measures undertaken by the government. So that is why I can say that the scope is quite limited of this committee, that it is only able to certify and confirm whether the government is properly or efficiently spending the money or not. However, it cannot critique the policy measure of the government. Also, the suggestions given by this committee are recommendatory in nature, which means they are not binding of the government. That is why, as the recommendations are not binding of the government, we have seen the government has somewhat lackluster or delayed the response which are given by this committee. Also, the government sometimes takes quite a lot of time to table these reports in the parliament, which also highlights the delay caused in the table of these reports. That is why, as the recommendations are not binding on the government, which does not force the government to give the proper response to the recommendations. Hence, you can say the effectiveness of this committee is quite limited. So, these are the challenges which I have highlighted. Also, in terms of performance of the schemes and measures of the government, this committee cannot evaluate the outcomes of the schemes and measures taken by the government. Hence, the performance of the schemes undertaken by the government cannot be analyzed and commented upon by this very committee, which also highlights an issue faced by this committee. Further, any parliamentary committee by theory is formulated in terms of making the parliamentary responsibility go beyond party lines, because the members, they operate in this committee beyond the public glare. So you can expect the members to go beyond party lines and check effectively the functioning of the executive. But in practice, we have seen that political bias and influences have played a key role in the deliberations of the committee, which you can see quite clearly from the subjects picked up by this very committee, as these subjects are the weak point of the government. So you can say that political influence plays a key role in the functioning of this committee, which sometimes can go against the effectiveness and unbiasedness nature of the committee proceedings also. So these are the sum totals of the issues which are faced by the Public Accounts Committee. And in this regard, let us undertake or let us understand what are the steps that can be taken to improve the functionings of the Public Accounts Committee. And the first suggestion in this regard is to have a better relationship with the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. because this is a key constitutional functionary. However, the appointment of the CAG comes under the sole prerogative of the government of the day. Hence, in this regard, the participation of parliament, or for that matter, public accounts committee, is very limited in this nature. So, if the government were to consult the members of Public Accounts Committee in appointing the CAG, it will highlight the better relationship, specifically better working relationship between CAG as well as the Public Accounts Committee, because CAG in this regard acts as a friend, philosopher, as well as the guide of the Public Accounts Committee. Also, there is a need to give wider ambit to the public accounts committees, particularly in the matters that it considers on its own. So, in this regard, the Public Accounts Committee should have a habit to undertake many suo motu cognizance of very issue and allegations of impropriety on the government to enhance the ability of the parliament to undertake or to hold the executives accountable. Further, the discussions of the reports filed by PSC in the parliament should be made mandatory, that in every session at least 2.5 hours should be given to the reports of PSC, and it should be discussed on the floor of the house, because then only we'll be able to hold executive accountable quite efficiently and properly. Further, the reports of this committee, before being tabled into the parliament, there should be a scope for seeking public opinion on what the public thinks about the matter. Hence, after the public sought their opinion or has given their opinions to the PSC, then we can say that the reports by the PSC will be quite comprehensive and thorough in nature. Also, the recommendations which are given by this committee should be made binding of the government, or at least it should be made binding on the government to submit action taken report at the earliest possible time. Then only we'll be able to say that the Public Accounts Committee is quite effective in nature. Further, as I've already highlighted, that the scope and capacity of the committee is quite limited. Hence, in this regard, we can take experts' help or external experts' help to enrich the quality of reports of the PSC also. Because only then we can say that with the help of financial experts, the PSC will be able to understand the government finances better and accordingly suggest various measures in order to make the government finances more and more efficient and effective. So these were the discussions related to first article of the day. With this, we move to second set of articles, which you can see appeared in all three newspapers, that is the Hindu, Indian Express, as well as Business Line newspaper. Now, the sum total of these three news articles, they highlight that the union government has expanded the scope of Ayushman Bharat Jan Arogya Yojana. Now, earlier, the scheme or the benefits of this scheme was extended to poor and vulnerable families, which constituted about 55 crore beneficiaries. But yesterday, the uh, benefit of this scheme have been extended to all senior citizens over and above 70 years of age. Now, originally, this scheme provides for rupees 5 lakh cover per family per year. Now, every senior citizen in the country who is over and above 70 years of age will be made available separate set of finances for up to 5 lakhs per year per senior citizen. Now, the benefits available to senior citizen will be over and above the benefits made which are provided quite currently. So this is quite a significant development, because this development will be able to cover at least 6 to 7 crore senior citizens in India. Now, this development also becomes crucial because you can understand the life expectancy and the mortality rates of India are quite improving. So, in coming future, we can expect that large amount of senior citizens will continue to live, and hence to ensure their less social benefit and also their healthcare services are taken care of, the government has expanded the benefit of Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana or Ayushman Bharat Jan Arogya Yojana. Now, this news article becomes important from GS paper to syllabus, because you can see syllabus highlights government policies and intervention for development of various sector, and in this regard the sector is healthcare sector, and the issues arising out of their design and implementation. Further, questions have been frequently asked on healthcare and its related issues, which you can see quite here. So, in this regard, let us understand what are the features and significance of Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, which is a sub-component of Ayushman Bharat program. Now, there are two sub-components. First is setting up of health and wellness center, and second is providing of healthcare coverage under the Jan Arogya Yojana. We'll be dealing with this particular subsection of the scheme. Now, this scheme, as I've already highlighted, provides health coverage to a large beneficiary base. That is, it aims to cover 12 crore economically and socially vulnerable families who are identified based on socio-economic caste census. And the beneficiaries, sum total, are expected to cover at least 55 crore Indian people. Now, this beneficiary base have been expanded with yesterday, and it will further include 6 to 7 crore more senior citizens in the country. Now, the benefit or the amount insured, it is rupees 5 lakh per family, and this benefit is provided to them every year. Further, as per today's article, what it highlights that additional cover of 5 lakh has been provided to every senior citizen in the country as well. So these are the benefits, that first of all 5 lakh per family per year is applicable to these 55 crore beneficiaries, and for senior citizens additional cover of 5 lakh is also available. Now the cover which is provided under this scheme is quite comprehensive, that it provides secondary as well as tertiary healthcare benefits, and it extends to both public sector hospitals as well as private sector hospitals. So the beneficiaries, they can not just go to government hospital, but they can also go to private hospital, and they will be covered under this Jan Arogya Yojana. Now the benefit is not just provided for hospitalization, but it is also provided for pre-hospitalization for a period of 3 days, as well as for post-hospitalization cover for a period of 15 days. Also, the benefits of this scheme are portable in nature. That is, if one family member is located in, say, Kashmir, they can also get benefit of this scheme. And if the other family member is working in city of Bangalore, they can also get benefit because the scheme is portable in nature. Also, this scheme provides wider amount of coverage, that is more than 1900 of uh, facilities in the hospital, including diagnostic operational procedures. They are covered in this scheme. Hence, you can understand the coverage is quite wide. And the original intention of the scheme is to reduce the out-of-pocket expenditures by which is made by the people, because earlier, before this scheme was brought, as much as 63 to 64% of expenditures made by Indians on healthcare was made out of pocket. So you can understand this high amount of expenditures made on health made a lot of people quite vulnerable, that they were only just one disease away from getting back into poverty line. Further, this scheme also intends to catalyze infrastructure development, particularly healthcare infrastructure in tier 2 or tier 3 towns. Also, it will help develop in healthcare infrastructure in suburban areas. Further, this scheme also intends to achieve India's sustainable development targets, especially the targets under the target given under 3.8, because it highlights that government should make efforts to provide its citizen the uniform healthcare coverage or universal healthcare coverage. So, as a large beneficiary base of Indian population will be provided with a health insurance scheme which is funded by the government, so you can understand this measure takes India closer to the targets of universal health coverage. So, in this regard, let us understand what are the challenges faced in the implementation of this scheme. Now, the first challenge in this regard is the availability of healthcare services, because the availability of healthcare services is not uniform across the country. Because you can understand in metro cities like Delhi and Mumbai, there are quite a good amount of private and government hospitals. So people who are living in these areas, they have access to good hospitals. But when it comes to hospitals in lesser or smaller towns or in uh, far-fetched areas, you can understand the amount of services available there are not quite sufficient. Further, whenever a person is ill, especially a poor people, the first point of their contact is the district hospital. But when it comes to district healthcare centers or super specialty hospitals, which are there in every district, as many as 33% of seats or amount of doctors, they are lying vacant. So the amount of healthcare services that these district healthcare centers can offer, they are quite behind or of what is originally envisaged. Now coming back to the quality control. Now there are total of 30,900 something hospitals which are impaneled under the Ayushman Bharat Yojana. Oh, sorry, it was 33,400 something hospitals. Now, out of these 30,400 hospitals, you know how many hospitals have a quality control certified by the government? Just 360 hospitals. So you can understand the majority portion of the hospitals, they do not have sufficient quality control. So the quality of services which are offered under this scheme, you can understand, are not as originally envisaged. Now, also coming to equity in access, which I have already highlighted, the amount of healthcare services are not uniformly distributed. So, when it comes to areas such as northeast part of the country or high reaches like Himalayan states, all these areas they have sufficient less amount of hospitals and healthcare services. So that is why the equity in terms of access to healthcare services is also not there. Also, it is quite important to note that this scheme does not covers any outpatient care. And according to various reports, total amount of expenditures which is made by the people, approximately 80% of the expenditures made by people are done on outpatient care, which remains out of the coverage of this scheme. So, this high amount of outpatient care, which is not covered by this scheme, makes people again vulnerable to high out of pocket expenditures. Further, the scheme faces certain implementation challenges as well because the guidelines or procedures to impanel hospital or what kind of cost that this hospital will incur, they are quite different based on different areas of the country. Further, the procedures which are undertaken by the healthcare service providers in a country, be it government and private, they are quite different in nature. Because for same procedure, which for the private sector takes or charges 5 lakh rupees, the government hospital can do the same procedure in say 2 lakh rupees. So the amount of procedures and the amount of standardization of this procedure both in terms of service quality as well as cost, they are quite different and also makes it difficult for the government to estimate the ideal cost of healthcare services. Further, as you can understand, the scheme which is offered is basically an insurance scheme. So whenever the government delays in paying the premium to the private sector, this also delays the amount of money that the private insurance companies gives to the hospital in return for their services. So the funding delay is also an implementation challenge of this scheme. Also, you can understand there are quite a lot of fraudulent transactions which also take place. Because in connivance with the hospitals, there are many people who imperson other people in order to take free healthcare services. And also, there are quite a lot of allegations that the hospitals are converting outpatients to inpatients in order to make them eligible for the coverage of this scheme. Also, there are quite a lot of exorbitant charges which are made by the private sector in general, which also increases the costs which are incurred by the government and private healthcare companies also. So these are the sum total of challenges which the government face in the implementation of this scheme. So, in this regard, let us understand what should be the way forward in order to make this scheme more and more efficient and effective in nature. And the first suggestion in this regard is the need to enhance the quality and quality accreditation of the hospitals in this nature. And in this regard, the government can take help of entities like NABH because they are a private source of certification for hospitals, and these bodies can undertake certification of hospital which will ensure better quality of services to the insurers in general. Further, real-time use of data can also be utilized in order to analyze what kind of services are being demanded by the people and what is the quality of services being offered by the healthcare providers. Further, as I've already highlighted, there is a need to equitably distribute the infrastructure and manpower, which will ensure that the advantage of this scheme is given universally. Hence, it will also help the government to achieve its target of providing universal healthcare coverage to a large beneficiary base. Further, as I've already highlighted, that there are many amount of parallel schemes which are undertaken by the government, and there is a need to consolidate the healthcare spending of the both central as well as state governments. Because if we do not consolidate these schemes and there are parallel schemes, it will have duplication of efforts and funds. So whenever there is a consolidation in the scheme, we can understand that every money spent on healthcare sector will be more efficiently spent on the benefits of the own people. Further, there is also a suggestion of moving the subject of health to the concurrent list because even today, the spending on healthcare sector, almost one third of the spending is made by the union government. And in this regard, to undertake better quality of services or to provide uniform quality of services across the country, there is a need for enhanced intervention by the central government. And the central government can only effectively intervene when the subject of health is given in the concurrent list. So these are the sum total of discussion on two mains related articles, and with this, we'll move to third article of the day. Now we move to the next set of articles, which is the article related to Waqf bill. Now there is a thing called Waqf property, which means any property, whether it is given for religious or charitable purposes, which is defined under Muslim law, then that property is categorized as a Waqf property. Now, the property which is under Waqf, they can be utilized for social, religious, as well as educational purposes for beneficiary or for the benefit of a large sect of Muslim population. However, it is important to note that the act of transferring a private property and to make it a Waqf property, it is a non-transferable process. That if once a property is designated as a Waqf property, it continues to remain a Waqf property for the remainder of the time. Now, the regulation of these Waqf property, they are primarily done by Waqf Act of the year 1995, and the administration and regulation of the property are done under this act. Now, recently, the government it brought a Waqf amendment bill. However, because of various issues, this bill was referred to a joint parliamentary committee. Now, this news article becomes important because any bill which is brought to regulate or administer properties, it is important from GS paper to perspective because syllabus highlights important aspects of governance as well as the need to ensure transparency, accountability, as well as other institutional measures. Further, articles related to various important legislation have been subject of UPSC questions in the past, as you can see quite here. So, in this regard, let us understand various important provisions of the Waqf Amendment Bill of the year 2014. Now, as I've already highlighted, the Waqf Amendment Act of the 1915, it provided certain sections or certain provisions for administration and regulation of the Waqf property, and this amendment bill looks to make certain changes. First change is related to formation and management of Waqf property. Earlier, the Waqf property can be established either through declaration or through long term use, or whenever a property meets the end of the succession or there are no rightful heirs to the property. However, this amendment bill looks to make certain changes in terms of how work property can be established. Now, the changes that can be made highlights that it can be only be declared as work property by a person who is practicing Islam for more than a period of 5 years. And also, the person who will designate a property as a work property should also own that very particular property. Further, any property cannot be designated as a work property if it is based on a long term usage. Further, any property, if it is designated as work, should not deny the rightful inheritance to its legal heirs, which should also include women heirs as well. Now, also, it also makes changes to how the government discharges the or the relation to government property. Earlier, there were many amount of government property which were declared as works. However, according to this amendment bill, if any government property which has been declared as works will cease to be a works property. Also, in case if there is any uncertainty over the ownership and regulation of that property, whether it belongs to the government or not, in that case, the amount or the uncertainty will be decided by the district magistrate of the particular district who will determine whether the ownership of that property rests with the government or not. Now, let us consider who should be able to determine the works property or not. Earlier, this determination of property was the sole prerogative of state level works board. However, with this amendment bill, the works board now cannot determine any property as a works property. Now, in terms of surveys of work property, earlier special officers such as survey commissioner and additional survey commissioners were set up to survey the work properties, which has now, after the amendment bill, becomes the sole prerogative of the district magistrate. Further, let us understand what are the changes to the composition of Central Waqf Council and Waqf Board made under this bill. Now, earlier, according to Waqf Act of the 1995, both Central Waqf Council and Waqf Board will only have just Muslim members. However, with this today, the amendment which is brought by the government, the Waqf Council and Waqf Board will also include members who are non-Muslim in nature, in addition to providing for wider representation for different sects, which include Shia, Sunni, as well as Bohras, as well as other sects also. And it also provides for non-Muslim members in the Waqf board as well. Further, earlier separate boards were only be constituted for Shia and Sunni sect, which also been expanded or extended to Aga Khani and Bohra sect as well. Now let us consider the matters of appeal and tribunal of the house. Now earlier the tribunals who will discharge function related to Waqf Act, they constituted or it included judges of specified ranks and knowledgeable person. However, this was quite indefinite in nature. However, the amendment bill makes it certain that the chairperson will have to be either current or a former district judge, and the member should have been a joint secretary based officer. Earlier, there were no appeals to the decisions which were passed by the Waqf tribunal. However, now, after the amendment, the matters which are or the judgments of the tribunal can be appealed to in the High Court within a period of 90 days. Now, let us come to the power of central government in this regard. Earlier, it was the prerogative of the state government who could have audited any work property anytime. However, the responsibility of audit has now been extended to CAG or any designated officer as fixed by the union government. Now, the rationale of this very amendment was to first address the concerns that were related to the discharge and administration of work property, because there were unchecked powers which was given to state level work board, and this related to certain controversies. For example, in the state of Tamil Nadu, the Tamil Nadu work board claimed a certain village to be a work property which had a majority population of Hindu population. So you can understand the rationale or the objective of bringing this amendment was to first ensure transparency in administration of work property, and also it provided for revised verification procedures which will include the district magistrate or the state government officials. Further, this amendment also provides diversity in representation, that it for sure provides for inclusion of women members as well as members from different sects of Muslim population, and it also looks to limit the powers of the state level Waqf board and central Waqf council in regards to administration and determination of Waqf property. However, this amendment has also faced several challenges. First, as you can understand, the government has increased their control over discharge and determination of Waqf property, and this increased control by the government comes at the cost of reduced powers of the Waqf board. Now, this reduced powers of the Waqf board has brought the allegations on encroachment of minority rights. That, on one hand, the Constitution of India provides that the minorities are well within their rights to discharge any property or educational property as according to their will. However, whenever that very particular property is being managed or administered by the government, it encroaches on the rights of the minority. Further, originally, this bill intends to reduce the amount of disputes related to work property. But in practice, if the government is also becoming a stakeholder in the work related dispute, it has the potential not to eliminate but rather exacerbate the amount of total disputes related to work property. So, these are the concerns related to proposed amendment, and this was all for today's discussion on Waqf Amendment Bill. Now, with this, we move to another set of articles which you can also see appeared in all three newspapers. And this article highlights that the government yesterday brought a new scheme to promote the demand of e-vehicles in the country. As this scheme provides for a budget of almost 11,000 crores, and this scheme will be applicable for a period of 2 years. Now, this scheme is important from the perspective of prelims because prelim syllabus highlight economic and social development. And this scheme not just intends to promote the demand for e-vehicles, but it also looks to create infrastructure as well as promote domestic manufacturing of e-vehicles. Further, questions related to the very same topic have been asked quite recently in prelims, that was last year. So this topic becomes important from prelims examination. So with this, let us understand the various nuances of this important scheme. Now, this scheme is called Pradhan Mantri Electric Drive Revolution in Innovation Vehicle Enhancement, which has been abbreviated as PM E-Drive scheme. In this scheme, it discharged by the Ministry of Heavy Industries. Now, this scheme is valid for a period of 2 years and has a budget of rupees 10,900 crore rupees. Now, this scheme intends to provide support for purchase of electric two vehicles, electric three vehicles, electric buses, electric trucks, electric ambulances, and also procurement of buses by state transport organizations. Further, the scheme also intends to set up charging stations in the country, in addition to setting up of testing infrastructure in the country as well. Further, the benefits of this scheme will be extended with the help of e-voucher, which can be generated on the scheme portal, and the e-voucher will be authenticated based on Aadhaar card. And the vouchers to be able to be uh, refunded needs to be signed by both, that is the customers as well as supplier of e-vehicles. So you can understand the primary objective of this scheme is to facilitate or provide incentives for electric vehicles, because currently the cost of electric vehicles are quite high, which reduces their demand. So in order to reduce the cost of e-vehicles, the government is providing with incentives to the buyers of e-vehicles. Further, the scheme also looks to create charging infrastructure as well as testing infrastructure, which will also provide for increased penetration of e-vehicle, addition to reducing the amount of footprint of transportation sector in general. Additionally, this scheme looks to promote EV industry growth by encouraging domestic manufacturing, which will also generate a huge amount of employment opportunity in India. So based on this information, let us now solve the practice question. The first is, consider the following statements. The scheme includes a component for procurement of e-buses aimed at enhancing public transportation. This is a correct statement as I've already highlighted here. The second statement, e-vouchers need to be signed by both buyer and dealer to claim demand incentives. Again, correct, as these vouchers will be authenticated through Aadhaar and will be signed by both customers as well as sellers. Further, the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways of India is the nodal agency for implementation of the scheme, which is incorrect. As I've already highlighted, this scheme is a scheme by Ministry of Heavy Industries. So, as statement 1 and 2 are correct, hence option A is the right answer to this practice question. And with this, we move to last article of the day, which appeared in the Indian Express newspaper. And this news article quotes the Attorney General of Government of India as he held that effectuation of fundamental duties has to be a continuing task. Now, this news article becomes important from prelims perspective because the syllabus highlights Indian polity and governance with special emphasis on Constitution of India. So, the government through Part 4A provides for Article 51A in the Constitution, which provides for a certain set of fundamental duties on citizens of India. Also, questions on this very topic have been appearing in prelims examination. Case in point, this 2017 question. So, in this regard, let us understand what are these fundamental duties. Now, in context of India, it is quite understood that rights of people of India, they do not exist in isolation. Rather than, as Constitution provides people of India with certain rights, it also expects people of India to discharge some of their civic or moral duties. However, the original Constitution or its draft did not contain any instance of fundamental duties. Whereas this fundamental duty was rather added to the Constitution by 42nd Amendment, which added Article 51A. Further, this act, this provision was further amended by Article 86th Constitutional Amendment Act, which provided for an fundamental duty related to right to education. Further, let us understand some of the characteristics of fundamental duties also. Now, these fundamental duties not just involves moral duty, but it also highlights civic duties of the house. For instance, cherishing noble ideas of freedom struggle is a moral percept on Indian population, whereas respecting the symbols such as constitution, national flag and national anthem is a civic duty of citizens of India. So you can understand the values which are there in the duties. It reflects or is a part of Indian tradition, religious as well as their Indian practices. However, as against fundamental rights, which extend not just to citizens of India but also to foreigners, the fundamental duties are confined to citizens only and do not are applicable on foreigners. Whereas, like directive principles, these fundamental duties they are also non-justiciable in nature, which means that there is no provision in the Constitution for direct enforcement of fundamental duties by court of law. Hence, there is no legal sanctions against the violation of fundamental duty. However, the parliament is also free to enforce any fundamental duty through a suitable legislation. Now, based on this information, let us now solve the practice question. Consider the following statements regarding fundamental duties. The first statement, they are confined to citizens only and do not extend to foreigners, which is correct because it is different from fundamental rights. Although the second statement, the constitution provision regarding fundamental duties have never been amended, it is incorrect. It was amended once through 86th Amendment Act in the year 2002. And second statement is incorrect. The third statement, all fundamental duties are justiciable and can be enforced directly in court. Again, incorrect because they are non-justiciable. And the fourth statement they include both moral and civic duties, which is correct, as I've highlighted examples of both here. As statement 1 and 4 are correct, hence option B is the right answer to this practice question. And with this, we conclude our today's session of Daily News Simplified. Stay tuned to our YouTube channel for more updates, and we'll see you again tomorrow at 6 p.m. sharp. So until then, I wish you a very good night.